All right, so we'll talk about the first 3 essay topics. So we'll talk about the first one. So I'll read it out and then I'll explain the different parts of it and what would you be expecting to see when you're answering that essay question. So the first one is a discussion essay question. So the social determinants of health are important considerations when evaluating health of population groups and when delivering appropriate local health services. Select a remote community, and it has to be classified AS and RA4. And then using a public health promotion, discuss the implications of remoteness for the health of this community. Detail and discuss the strengths and weaknesses of one health promotion initiative within this community. What I'll do is I'll just share my screen so that we can all look at the same essay questions together. Here we go. Okay. So this essay question, to do well, first obviously you need to choose one community, so a remote community. There's a range of remote communities, in Victoria, but also other areas as well. So first job is to choose one of those communities. You don't have to be familiar with that community, but before you go and start writing an essay with that community, make sure that you can find adequate information for the community. So that's the first thing. We'd want to see in that introduction for that essay topic what community it is. That's what we'd be expecting to see. So we'd want that named community. Then what you need to do is you need to get a bit of a profile of that community. So we want to know how many people live in that community. We also want to know things like, if there's some common health issues. So is this community has a lot of people diagnosed with cardiovascular disease, or is oral health an issue within this community? You need to kind of give us some information. You'll also want to be telling us what kind of health services are available. You might even tell us, how many schools are available. If they don't have a health service, where's their closest health service? So you're really setting the scene. You need to, in this essay, to tell us about this community. And then you need to talk about these implications of remoteness. So what social determinants of health are going on in this remote community that are unique to this remote community, and how does that impact on health? So if we found community X has high rates of cardiovascular disease, and why is that the case? So looking at social determinants of health and linking that to the health of the community. So there might be I don't know, it could be anything, but just think about that, using that, what we've spoken about in the last couple of weeks in this subject, those social determinants of health, and then link that and how that people living in this remote town and how that impacts on their health. Then what you need to do is you need to choose one health promotion initiative that takes place within that remote town. So an idea would be making sure that when you're talking about the implications of remoteness for the community's health, that you actually discuss the health issue that the health promotion initiative is working on. Okay, so there's no point in this essay, and I've seen it happen and students don't do so well if they do this, is they're talking all about cardiovascular disease, and then their health promotion initiative that they're talking about is about falls prevention in elderly. It needs to kind of flow and marry up. So make sure the health promotion initiative that you're discussing in the essay links to what you've discussed previously in the essay. That's the biggest thing. So really the tip I'd give you for that first essay question would be to make sure that you maybe find your town and then maybe find your health promotion initiative, and then, kind of look at what that initiative is focusing on, and then you can fill in that middle section of the essay around, this is what is going on, and then linking that to the community health. So you've got to discuss the strengths of that health promotion initiative, but also the weaknesses. So sometimes a tip here to make it a bit easier on yourself is if you choose a health promotion initiative that's been around for a while, and then that way that initiative will have been evaluated, and there will be documents on evaluations. And in those evaluation documents, they will tell you what worked well, so they're your strengths, and what needs to be improved. So they're your weaknesses. So they're the kind of, that makes it easier, but also you can have a look at health promotion initiatives that haven't been evaluated and look at, you could maybe identify some of the weaknesses and write about that. But you really need to make sure that you do talk about the strengths and also the weaknesses. So that's part of that essay question. In this document that I've got up on the screen, there's obviously, tips and tricks. Really look at those lists because they're there to help you. And especially for this choice one, it's really important that you look at also the benefits of the remoteness to this community's health. So it doesn't have to be all negative. In this essay, we really do like you to also then draw out what's positive about living in this remote town. And there must be positive things, this is what I always say, because otherwise people wouldn't live there. What is also the good parts of living in this remote community? So really for this first essay question, you would need to get onto the ABS to get some data around this town as well. So I'd expect you to reference that. And then I'd also expect in that middle section when you're discussing the implications of remoteness for this community's health, that's when I'd like to see academic journal articles used. All right. Just checking, no questions as of yet. All right. Topic 2. So this one is all about, rural issues that we see in the media and linking it to rural health. Okay, so what we know about social determinants is it's a big interweb of connections, and we know things flow on and other things really do, impact on things. So what we're asking you to do in this one is we're asking you to choose one issue that you may have seen in the media and discuss how that has an impact on families and communities in rural and regional and remote areas. So for this one, what you need to do first is obviously choose an issue that you've seen. So an issue that hasn't really got anything to do with health. So we've got examples here like land productivity, if I can get the word out, water prices, international trade, land buy-ups. Some more current ones are things like the milk prices. So we've seen this year a lot of milk prices. Okay, I've just got to chat. All right, I'll just stop and answer a question that I've got from one of the participants about choice 1. So the question is the town or community, or can we do a subgroup of the town as your community? You could focus on a specific population within your chosen community. That's fine. So, like, for example, say if you decided on using a town, Malakuta, as your town, and then you only just focus then on elderly in Malakuta, that would be fine. And then you can talk about the remoteness and the implications on a subgroup's health. That would be fine. And then making sure that the health promotion initiative is linked to that subpopulation group. So hopefully that answers that question. So yeah, you can make it more narrow if you want. It's up to you, just as long as it makes sense and it flows. We're not going to mark down if you take more of a narrow approach to the essay question. All right, so okay, back to number 2. So like I was saying, you need to choose an issue. And like I was saying, milk prices is a perfect one. It's been in the media a lot. So I'm going to use milk prices as an example when we're talking about this essay question, so that I can kind of tease out what we're expecting for this question. So in this topic, what we'd then be expecting you to talk about is we're expecting you to set the scene. So talk about the issue that you're focusing on. So milk prices. For that, you could use media, so newspaper articles, as sources, because you're setting the context of this is what's going on. Milk prices, are getting quite low for the consumers. That means that obviously what we're paying our farmers is quite low. So you're setting the scene, that's done. Then what you need to do is you need to link then the drop in milk prices, link that to the social determinants of health. have a discussion about the social determinants of health, and then link that to how that's impacting on the health of individuals, families, and also communities. So that's really important. If you just focus on the individual, we're not going to mark you as well as if you're focusing on the individuals and also the communities. So for this, if we think about milk prices, obviously milk prices are decreasing, farmers are getting less. So the first main thing that would come to my mind when discussing this would be then the loss of income. Okay, so that's the social determinant of health. You could then, there's lots of, you could talk about loss of income, and there's lots of articles there that, if someone loses their income, we see higher rates of mental health issues, suicide, so you could be talking about that. What other things, then you need to just think about what other social determinants, how else are the milk prices affecting what's going on in this community. So if you think about it, loss of income, then sometimes what we see families of farmers then moving away so that a wife can get a job in town, so they're not living with the farm at the farm anymore. So that can cause some social isolation sometimes. That's obviously a health consequence, but also the social determinants of health. Sometimes in worst case scenarios, people can no longer afford to keep their farms because of this loss of income. They sell up. That means small local communities lose members of the community. That can then have a flow-on effect to community shops, because people are no longer coming and spending money in town. So then other businesses affected by these milk prices. So there's all these flow-on effects, and that's what we really want you to get out of this essay question, is looking at an issue that sometimes is portrayed in the media a lot of the time. But if you're not living in that rural town where it's affecting, this essay, we're hoping you to kind of tease out what's actually going on and then what ill health effects does that have. So even though we've said in this essay question, rural issues in the media, we don't want all your evidence to come from newspaper articles, media articles and things like that. We do want you to have journal articles, and you're probably not going to find a whole journal article that talks about, say, milk prices, loss of income and mental health issues all in the one article. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to link milk prices and loss of income with one reference, and then loss of income and how that impacts on a person's mental health, or loss of income or social isolation and how that impacts on a person's mental health. So it's all about you trying to make those connections between what's going on. All right, so I don't think there's any more questions. So any questions about that choice 2 essay question? No? All right, stop me if there is. So then the choice 3, the last essay question, that's an argumentative essay. So what we're asking you to choose a side, and we're saying the question is, social media can be used to improve health in rural and remote Australia. And you may argue for or against this statement, but you have to back up your point of view with evidence and present both sides of the argument. So we don't mind which side you take. I think with this question, it's really important that it's clear in the introduction which topic or which side you've decided on. Is social media good for a good way to improve rural health, or is it, detrimental? Make that clear from the get-go, what one, which side you're on. And then there's lots of websites that tell you how to structure an argumentative essay. So it's just up to you how you want to do it. But really you do have to present both sides of the argument. So really, for this one, what you need to do is you obviously need to define your key terms in the introduction, as well as tell us what side you're on. So what is social media? Make sure you do have a definition of social media and what it is. Sometimes in previous years, I've seen people give me a definition of social marketing, which isn't the same. And then make sure you can use some references from other countries, so international examples, but make sure that it's a similar country to ours, because remember that our rural health is quite different to other countries. So Japan's rural health, they're not as remote or as isolated as Australia. So sometimes their examples and those things aren't a good example. But There's lots of evidence in Australia with social media already being used, and the benefits and barriers to that. So make sure that you're using that evidence. Make sure in this one that you use some examples, how it's already happening, some real life examples. There's lots of examples out there of social media being used for, say, for example, to improve rural health. You've got things like, and we see this a lot with any kind of health issue, things going viral, hashtags taking off, and that's no different. There's been hashtags that have taken off around rural health issues. So they're the kind of real life examples that you'd want to use within the essay to demonstrate your point. So make sure you find some real life examples, make sure it's clear what side you're taking for the essay, and make sure that you have journal articles and evidence to back up what you're saying. Like I was saying, there are lots of different ways to write an argumentative essay. In this document, just a little bit further down, there's a link that takes you to a website that's got some good, clear examples of different ways you can set up the argumentative essay. All right. So does anyone have any questions about choice 3? No. All right. So what I'm going to do now is just quickly swap over and show you the marking guide, have a quick discussion about that. If you don't have, if you've got any questions, just put it in the chat and then we can talk about them after I've shared this marking guide. All right, so first section is worth 9 marks, okay? So structure and logic, we're giving you 9 marks, and it's, how is the essay clear? Does it flow? Does it make sense? Making sure you have defined your key terms and made sure that you're consistent throughout the essay. This is where you also get marks for making sure that you've got a conclusion and that your conclusion is concluding what you've discussed in the essay and you're not bringing up any new information. That's a big no-no. Obviously, neat presentation, margins, making sure it's double-spaced. Because we mark online, double spacing just makes it easier for us to read, and then making sure you've just got margins. So just the normal margins that you would have on a computer, on a normal Word document is sufficient. You also need to have, either in a header or a footer, you need to have your, page number, name, course, and year level in the footer. Okay, so make sure that it's really clear that you do have all that information within a header or a footer. You do lose marks if you don't have that. All right, so then for the content, you get 16 marks. So for each topic, making sure that you address the essay question. This is what we're assessing you on in this section here, is making sure you've actually addressed the essay question. So obviously for all of the essay questions, with the content, we're making sure that you've got evidence and literature to support what you're saying. So like I was saying, last semester we did find that a lot of students had the whole paragraphs with no references. That's not on. We expect you to have references within each paragraph, and we expect that you show us where you've got this information from. For the topic 1, what we're expecting from that is you give us a bit of a description of the context. And what we mean by context in that sense is that we want you to tell us what the town is like. There's the stats, how many people there are, things like that, health services, health issues. You're setting that kind of context. You've mentioned the challenges of being in a remote area and the implications that has on the person's health or the community's health, but you're also talking about the benefits. Okay, so just not always taking a negative stance, making sure that you also highlight what's good for this remote town, being so remote, and what benefit that has for their health and well-being. And then making sure you're looking at the social, cultural, political, economic factors that may be relevant for that community. You don't need to focus on all of those, but the ones that are relevant. And then it's making sure you discuss both strengths and weaknesses of the One Health Promotion Initiative. All right, so then topic 2, we really want you to make sure that you're demonstrating a broader understanding of the rural health issues or rural issues, and then how that then flows down and impacts on the community and individuals' health. So we want you to also talk about the social determinants of health. Like I was saying, milk prices and how that impacts on a person's income. That might then mean people move out of town. There's, loss of actual bodies within communities, but then also there's the social isolation of sometimes people not wanting to ask for help if they are struggling. And then making sure that you do take on a primary health, or you're looking at the equity of the issue, okay? So you don't need a whole paragraph on that dot point. It's just we want you overall for you to be looking at the equity issues that may be faced when looking at these rural health issues. So don't get too hung up on that. That's just more making sure you've got that as a whole approach when answering this essay question. Topic 3, the things we're looking for when we're marking against this is obviously making sure that you've mentioned both sides of the argument and it's clear which side that you're on. And then making sure that you utilise examples. So like I was saying, those examples of what we've seen previously happening with social media and how that impacts. So whether, you say, if you take the stance that yes, social media is good for rural health issues because, it's good about raising awareness to policymakers and people that may not have any idea what's going on in this community, but it raises the awareness. A perfect example of this is a hashtag that went viral around, rural issues, da-da-da-da-da-da. That's your example. Or you could say, no, social media is not great for people's health because there's issues of privacy and, if we're using social media for, telehealth and things like that, no, there's issues of privacy. Here's an example. So that's what we really want you to pull out is, have a few key arguments and then make sure you have some specific examples for those key arguments. Then we're marking, you get 9 marks for how it's written. So this is grammar, spelling, all the things that we normally do within essays, making sure that it's, it flows, that it's an appropriate academic standard. This is an essay, so we'd expect to see no headings, really clear topic sentences, signposting to the reader what this paragraph is going to be about. So thinking back, making sure that all your paragraphs follow the teal structure. So your topic sentence, what's the sentence? What is this paragraph about? Then you've got your evidence, a sentence of, saying this is providing the evidence, an example, and then linking to the next idea. Make sure you follow that. You can't go wrong if you do. And then lastly, you get 6 marks for referencing. So this is making sure it's in APA reference. Your reference list is in alphabetical order. Your reference list matches your in-text references, that you've used a variety of reference lists and academic sources. So remember, peer-reviewed journal articles. You could use a textbook. You might even be using some newspaper articles, but that's obviously not peer-reviewed, so you don't want to use too many of those. That's more just for setting context. We really expect to see a lot of journal articles. And there's lots around. You can use the ones that we've already given you within the modules or the week-to-week guides. Otherwise, there's a whole journal on Australian Rural Health Journal, so you can search through there and find lots of information. But we do want to see a variety. And like I was saying at the start of this, is we'd expect about at least 8 journal articles when you're writing this essay. Okay, so that's what we want to see. All right, so that's the marking guide. It's out of 40. Does anyone have any questions about this essay? Or maybe even if you've got a specific question about a certain topic, you're thinking about doing this, put it in the chat. I'm happy to answer it. You never know, someone else might be doing a really similar topic, so it will help them to hear what I say about that as well. So no one has any questions. There's not many of you on here, so you can even type in what topic that you're focusing on. All right, so we do have a question. So wants to know for, I'm guessing topic 1, if Alice Springs and Indigenous people is okay to focus on. Yep, that's fine. So, you can focus on Alice Springs. So I'd want some demographics around Alice Springs. And then you could say more specifically that there's X amount of Indigenous Australians within this population, and then focus on the remoteness of that town and how that impacts on that specific Indigenous group. That would be a great one. And then just make sure that the health promotion initiative that you focus on is tailored to Indigenous Australians in that area. And sometimes for that example, so with the health promotion initiative, yep. So then I've just had the same person ask whether then they could just focus on diabetes, and that would be fine. So you might take a general approach talking about Alice Springs, narrowing it down to Indigenous population, and then narrowing it down again to just focusing on diabetes, and then your health promotion initiative would just focus on diabetes. And that's fine. So your health promotion initiative doesn't need to address everyone in the specific population. It could just be a small subpopulation. So you could talk about Alice Springs, Indigenous, and then you might just focus on children, a health promotion initiative around Indigenous children, and that's fine. So that's, it is really that topic, all of the topics really, you can kind of tailor them to what you want to get out of this essay, and what's your interest, because obviously you want to do something you're interested in so that it has a lasting impact. Does anyone else have any questions about this? So I think really what the point that we as a staff really want to drive across is just make sure that you have evidence, and making sure that you do have, quite an extensive reference list to back up what you're saying. We want a range of resources. If you do have any questions after this session, put it on the LMS discussion board. We're pretty quick to answer them. And if you have the question, someone else might have the question. If you really want a specific help with your exact topic, you're more than welcome to email myself or your facilitator and say, this is a plan I'm looking at going with this essay. What do you think? Okay, just another question. This is about topic 3, so the social media topic, and the argumentative essay. Just asking whether you can use current affair or other news as references or resources. You can a little bit, but mostly you could for the examples. That would be a really great way to find examples at how social media is being used in rural and regional areas, but we'd still expect you to see lots journal articles, because there's lots of journal articles around there about social media and how it's been used, but you could also then have those articles and then also showing us, well, how it's actually played out in the media and whether that's been good for the health or not great for the health. So you can use media reports to kind of set the context, but just don't rely solely on those ones to make points when you can find that information around social media in journal articles. And what you'll find with the journal articles around social media, it'll be fairly new information. Obviously, social media is a new thing, but there's lots of, the last 10 years it's kind of exploded, and you will be able to find lots of information around the use of social media for health. There's lots of apps being designed now that are used for health professionals, and there's lots of information out there, especially with data and data entry and patient records being online now and in social media forms and things like that. Okay, so I'll give you another minute to ask any questions and then we'll stop the session there, because that's really the big points I wanted to drive home, is just make sure there is evidence, make sure that you do read those dot points and make sure you do cover everything off in the essay topic. And if you're unsure, please ask. We're here to help. We don't want you to not do well in this essay. It is worth 40% of your mark, so it's worth quite a bit. All right, just while I've still got you here, just want to make sure, I've been asked by Peter, so this is for paramedic students, so if you're not a paramedic student, you can just ignore what I'm saying right now. Make sure that you check your online discussion board. He needs to post you something out to placement for you to do an assignment. So if you haven't checked or spoken to Peter about receiving an envelope for another assignment for your paramedic subject, please do. He's asking me just to remind you to do that. All right, well, thank you for that. And like I said, if you've got any other questions, pop them up on the LMS board or email your facilitators. So thank you for coming to the Zoom session. Hopefully you found it useful. If you've got any feedback on what you would find more useful in one of these Zoom sessions, please email me. We've got a couple more coming up around, especially around the reflective piece. So I'm more than willing to tailor these Zoom sessions to what works for you and what you are needing. All right, thank you very much. Oh no, got a chat before we go. Oh no, thank you. Thank you. All right then. Good luck with the essay writing, and we're looking forward to reading them. All right.